Thank you all for joining us today. And Mark, great to have you here.
Thanks so much.
Your video really captures the wide array of what you have, everything from hairstyling tools to vacuums to blenders. And I've got to say, that's not necessarily an exciting area. So what have you done to bring excitement and freshness to something as simple as a vacuum or a blender?
Well, look, solving consumer problems is exciting. And these are problems that you could say, well, vacuums have been around for 100 years. I mean, hasn't every problem been solved? And the reality is that consumers work around the problems that products have. And what SharkNinja's business is about is identifying those known or unknown consumer problems and then creating solutions to those problems, or trying to identify things that consumers are doing outside the home that they're not able to do inside of the home, and we can talk about what a number of those look like.
You've used social media to get the word out on some of these newer types of things, ice cream makers being one of them. What have you learned that works? And then I'm curious to also hear what's not worked for you.
Yeah. Well, look, first off, I would say, historically, we started out doing infomercials back 17, 18 years ago. So you'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you'd see my partner on TV and he was doing some sort of demonstration that we came up with in his living room or something like that as we wrote these infomercials. And it was really about kind of educating the consumer about what was unique or different about our products and how it could help them in the home. And we saw very quickly back in 2008, 2009 that the consumer was getting more and more power. They were, not just looking at things like Consumer Reports, they were going to online reviews, and they were looking at online reviews, and they were making their buying decisions based upon the research that they had done. And as you fast forward to 2016, they'd go into Facebook group chats. And then ultimately, around 2019, that really evolved much more into social media. And so, consumers are getting their information through social media, but they're also hacking our products and they're bringing our products to life on social media. We would run a commercial on NBC at 9 o'clock at night, and the only people that would see that commercial were the people that were watching that show. Whereas today, we put something on social media, and if you look in the comments section, consumers are saying, when is the product coming to Norway? When is it coming to Portugal? I mean, the consumer, has so much information today.
The challenge of social media is there's such a high bar for authenticity, and if it feels like you're forcing something, people can be very much turned off. What have you learned that maybe flopped or didn't feel authentic that you learn from and use as you go forward?
Well, let's start with, you have to develop products that consumers love. Okay, that is where our business starts and stops. I mean, our business, we develop 25 ground-up products a year that we bring to market, and consumers love our products. And so the authenticity has to start with that you can't sell something that ultimately the consumer decides, hey, this is not really a great product. The second is that you've got to start activating a user-generated flywheel, okay, where consumers on their own are doing something with your product to bring it to life. In the month of December, we have a product called the Ninja Creamy. It's an at-home ice cream maker. 99.8% of the content on social media in the month of December had nothing to do with SharkNinja. It was just consumers buying the product, bringing it home, developing their own recipes, and then going and putting their own content out, into, other consumers.
How do you do that, though? It feels a little bit like capturing lightning in a bottle to count on consumers to just latch on to something you put out.
Testing. I mean, you think that you develop products and it's not lightning in a bottle, okay? It is, before a product goes out into the market, that product is in 1,000 consumer homes around the world for as much as 4 weeks. We're making anywhere from the time a product goes into tooling to the time it goes to mass production, we're making anywhere from 80 to 150 changes on that product. getting consumer feedback, having them tell us what they love, what they don't love about the product, and then iterating. And we do that on the product, we do that on the messaging, we do that on the packaging, we do that on the social media content, but it's testing.
What's an example of something you've changed by learning through testing?
We've developed, vacuum cleaners, for example, that, we think aesthetically a handle might look great. And then we'll put it into consumer homes that are, a group of older consumers, 70-year-old consumers and over, some of which have arthritis, and they tell us, we hate the handle of the vacuum. Okay, it's not easy to push. It's not easy for them to grip. We'll scrap it and we'll retool it and we'll redesign it and we'll start over again. So it's not just about getting feedback from kind of the core consumer, it's about getting feedback from extreme consumers. I mean, consumers on either end of the spectrum. A vacuum cleaner might be really easy for a 35-year-old person to push around the house, but what's it going to be for a 75-year-old person with arthritis to push around the house?
You mentioned vacuum cleaners have been out forever. It seems like a hard thing to innovate in. How do you come up with ideas to push a device that's been around forever forward?
Yeah, I'll give you a great story that came up a couple of years ago. We went into about 100 consumer homes, and we're in, thousands of consumer homes over the course of a year. And we're watching consumers vacuum, and during the vacuuming session, a group of those consumers turn the vacuum over, take a knife or a scissor, slice the hair off the brush roll, pull the hair off the brush roll, throw it in the garbage, go back to vacuuming, and at the end of the cleaning session, we say to them, is there anything you changed with your vacuum? And they say, no, it works great. I'm sure any of you, show of hands, have had this happen to them, as you're vacuuming. And, we say, well, we saw you turn the vacuum over and you almost sliced your hand off, and they start apologizing and they start saying, we have 2 daughters, we have pets, of course we have to do this. They apologize for the deficiencies of the products because they've been using them for 20, 30 years, and this is just what they do. Well, that becomes a nugget of inspiration for our engineers, where we go back and say, could we develop a vacuum cleaner that doesn't wrap hair? And 18 months later, we come out with Shark's self-cleaning brush roll, and it winds up becoming the #1 selling vacuum cleaner in North America.
How do you think about the next categories to break into, the new products to come out with? I think your goal is to expand into 2 new categories this year and launched about 25 new products. Pretty ambitious. So where do you see room to play and a right to play as a company?
Well, so those are 2 interesting points. I mean, there's a lot of companies that aspire to go into new categories, but either the retailer or the consumer sees you and puts you in a box and says, we don't see your brand moving into those categories. So the first thing is we have to answer the question, what gives us the right to be in that category? I mean, the right to be in that category is not because a buyer will buy the product. I mean, there has to be some higher authority. I mean, what are we bringing to the consumer that they're not currently able to get with the products that are out there? And so as we enter categories, kind of the next door opens. And a great example of that is we entered into the beauty space a number of years ago with hair care. And our products became some of the best-selling hair care products. We're the fastest-growing hair care brand in North America today. And that ultimately opened the door for us to go into skincare. And we developed a product at the end of last year. We just launched it this year in the US called the Shark Cryo Glow. And so as the consumer started accepting us in hair, they ultimately said, wow, I mean, I would consider Shark for a skincare product. And that product has done great. But we're bringing to the consumer what we feel like is market-leading performance, solving some sort of problem that the consumer has, great quality and reliability, but we're doing it at an extraordinary value. You can't, in today's environment, have 2 of those 4 things, or even 3 of those 4 things. You've got to have all 4 of them.
It's no secret that consumers are very selective about their purchases, especially now, coming out of an inflationary period. A lot of your products come at a high price tag, especially those beauty products you mentioned. What are you doing to convince them that it's worth it?
Yeah. Well, look, a lot of our products, are highly multifunctional. So the question is not so much about the price, it's about what is the value of it. And I'll give you a good example. We got into the espresso coffee business with a product called the Lux Cafe. Household penetration in the US is about 2% for espresso. The average selling price for an espresso machine is about $800 in the US. So what we're solving for is not making better espresso. I mean, that's not what the consumer wants. What the consumer says is, I've got this valuable shelf in my kitchen. Okay, I want to put something. I'm only going to drink espresso sometime. But if you're an American, you're drinking drip coffee, you're drinking iced coffee, you're drinking cold brew. And so the problem to solve was not to make a better espresso machine. It was, how do you bring Starbucks to the countertop? Okay, and so we developed a product that makes espresso, drip coffee. We're from Boston, so we drink, 16, 18 ounces of drip coffee in the morning. Cold brew, iced coffee. It not only cold froth, makes hot froth, but it makes cold froth. It not only does that for dairy milk, but it does it for non-dairy milk. And the key was, we had to figure out what was that extraordinary value. And we price tested and price tested and price tested, and we ultimately realized that $4.99 was the price. That a consumer that is going to walk into the store and is willing to pay $2.99, they might be willing to push up for an occasion to $4.99, but they're not going to go higher than that. And so it's not always about making the best product, it's making the best product at the best value and bringing all those pieces together where when the consumer gets the product at home, they really feel like they made the right buying decision.
So it sounds like a lot of it comes down to looking at that item and saying, I will get my money's worth out of it because it can do all of these different things for me?
Absolutely.
What else are you hearing and seeing from the consumer right now?
The consumer is incredibly discerning. We're not competing against other small appliance companies. We're competing against restaurants. We're competing against vacations. The consumer has a certain amount of money to spend, and they're going to decide, what is the best way for them to be able to spend those dollars. And so, we've got to work hard. I mean, developing the best product, getting the consumer excited. We can't, be in a break-fix business because our products last for years. We've got to put our products into retirement before their usable life. We've got to get the consumer excited about what we offer and what we can bring to them either inside the home or outside the home.
We live in an age of dupes where there's a lot of products that you might come out with that other brands copy. And younger brands have shown they are maybe not as brand loyal as baby boomers were. How do you contend with that?
Innovate. Innovate faster, okay? I have a head of engineering that's been with me for a number of years, and he gets upset when there'll be a knockoff product that'll come out, and my answer to him is, you get 1 year. That's all you get. You get a 1-year head start. So we come to product with to market, and we know that product is going to get bought by 50 competitors within the first month. And they're going to tear it down, and they're going to reverse engineer it. They're going to figure out how to make it cheaper or dupe it. And we've got to make sure that we're bringing the most competitive supply chain, that we're able to make the products for as cost-effective as possibly can be made. And then we need to keep innovating. And we're not just innovating by pushing price points up. We're also innovating by, establishing kind of a floor for a product. I mean, you could buy a Ninja product for $59. You could buy a Ninja product for $1,000. You could buy a Shark product for $59. You could buy a Shark product for $899. So it's really about meeting the consumer where they are with what their use case is and what their budget is.
You kind of play on both sides of it because sometimes your competitors like Dyson come out with a game-changing product like the Airwrap. How do you respond to that competitive pressure and bring something that doesn't feel like a dupe but kind of takes the ball forward?
Well, again, it comes down to, are you bringing a product to market that is not currently out there? I mean, if you use the example of what you just brought up, we very much felt like with our Shark Flex style, the consumer has to first dry their hair, okay? And so why have to have a separate hair dryer and then a styler? We want to be able to have one product that dries your hair and then styles your hair, no matter whether your hair is type 1 hair and it's straight or it's type 4 hair and it's coily. And so we came up with this idea of, for all hair kind. I mean, how do we develop a product that is for all hair kind? And I think that, when the consumer ultimately sees that on social media, they recognize, wow, I mean, what the Shark product is doing is going way beyond, what something else, that might be out there. And we're doing it at a great value for them.
Switching gears a little bit, there's so many unknowns as I think about the year ahead that brands and retailers in the audience are thinking about. Tariffs being one, economic uncertainty being another. Will we have an economic downturn? What do you think are the biggest variables influencing your business at this moment?
Pivoting quickly. Okay, I mean, you have to in business. I mean, this is no longer an era of writing, a 60-page PowerPoint deck of your plan. Put whatever you have on one page, and then recognize that when you start your year on January 1st, likely by January 5th, the plan's going to change. And embrace the plan changing. Okay, embrace the pivoting. Spot the smoke early. Don't wait for there to be a raging fire before you realize that there's a problem. If there's a small puff of smoke, start pivoting and start figuring out how you need to maneuver. I mean, as our business grew, I mean, we were a small business back 16, 17 years ago. When you think about our business today on a global scale, what I'm most proud of is the ability to be able to spot challenges in the business and react quickly. I mean, on February 1st, there were incremental tariffs that came out. We got a group together of about 60 people in the company. We had them call in sick for 3 days. And at the end of those 3 days, they came up with 1,500 ideas of how to mitigate those tariff impacts on the business. So, this is not about, planning and then kind of working the plan. This is about kind of having a direction of where you want to go and then keep course correcting.
The housing market is another unknown. How much does that shape your business? Household formation and the housing market's been slow. If it picks back up, do you think that will be a help for you?
Yeah, look, the housing market really doesn't. I mean, our products don't require any installation. You could see a product on TV or social media or at a friend's house. The average sell price for our products is $199 to $229. You bring it home, you plug it in, and you're off and running. And so, we are all about how do we make your home or outside your home. And a lot of our products now are expanding into the outdoors. We feel like kind of the home is one aspect, but consumers are doing a lot more outside of the home, and there's a lot more problems to solve outside of the home as well.
We're close to the end of our time, but I wanted to wrap it up by asking you a little bit about going back to the consumer. Besides looking for value, what are other underappreciated trends or tendencies that you're seeing among consumers right now, or any particular area they're really leaning into?
Yeah, look, the consumer wants to be excited. Okay, they want to be, or they want to be excited, and I think one of the things that our products also do is we enable the consumer to hack our products. I mean, look at a product like the Ninja Slushie. You as the consumer can bring it home and you can just try out all kinds of things. Look at what we do with the Creamy. Look what we do with our hair care products. Getting the consumer to really feel engaged by your products. That the product is not just there. The product is, the consumer is able to do something with that product to kind of bring it to life in some unique and compelling way that kind of speaks to them.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you, Mark, for your insights.
Thank you.